Mayor McCallion?
Yes, this is quite exciting. I think this is an opportunity for us to put transportation in place before the development occurs. Yes, there's along Hurontario Street. It's very spotty, and a lot of vacant land still to be developed from the city core up to Brampton. A few office buildings are occurring. We always hoped the Hurontario would be our University Avenue. We refer to it as University Avenue. And quite honestly, this will not happen without the density, because the cost of operating light rail transit, we know what it is all about at Metrolinx. And what is concerning me, as we talk about how you finance it, capital cost is one thing, the operational cost is another. We had a public participation on road tolls, etc. And the public was very negative on the results. In other words, they want these services, and they know that it's the only way we should be going. But the public input that Metrolinx undertook was very negative on how it's going to be paid for. Not the capital as much as the operating. So it's a wonderful system, and I'm so happy that finally we're going to put in place a transportation plan if we have the determination to do it, that will be there before the major density occurs, both office, commercial, up number 10 highway. I would hope, Mr. Sajecki, that this light rail transit will determine the type of development that we will allow along number 10 here on Hurontario Street, because we've allowed some that does not support the light rail transit. It's already there, and it is not supportive of light rail transit, because you've got to have volume to support a light rail transit. You can't be dreaming about a light rail transit, but we have complaints now about empty buses running around Mississauga. We can't have empty light rail transit cars running up and down Hurontario Street. So let's be practical. If we're going to have a light rail transit, then we have to accept the density that will allow light rail transit to occur. For instance, there's a plan now coming to council, I believe, I don't know if it's in yet, of the school board lands that I believe is major office commercial along the front of those lands. Well, you're going to have to deal with it in light of light rail transit. That's going to be a major condition on which we should look at those major office construction that is planned for there. And by the way, in regard to the corridor, Windsor corridor, think about the link to the airport that we've studied so often. I think there was a report in the paper last week. I was on 3 of those studies, believe it or not, appointed in 3 of those studies, and it still hasn't happened. So we talk about a lot of plans, but when it comes to the implementation, quite honestly, folks, if you sat on Metrolinx, and you know the cost of doing what has to be done in this greater Toronto area to have an integrated transit system, I don't know where the money's going to come from. I really don't. It is astronomical, the amount of money required to even make an impact on the gridlock in the greater Toronto area. Make an impact, in fact, to try to stop it from getting worse is millions and millions of dollars that we have to look at. But we got to do the planning, and that's what I like about this. At least the plan will be there. As to when it will be implemented will depend completely on the provincial government and the federal government as to whether it's implemented. As we're struggling with the BRT right now, as to whether we'll have the funding because of the overrun in it. So it's good to plan. I find it difficult to figure out how we're going to finance it. And I guess it's good to have the plans there. I don't know what will come out of this economic turndown to the plans of Metrolinx. I really don't. We looked at it last Friday, or a week ago Friday, we talked about it as to whether some of the plans that we put before the province, with them coming forward with a budget this week of 18 billion deficit, as to how they will react to the demands of Metrolinx. But this is what is needed. And just remember that we're also looking at light rail transit on Dundas Street as well, which is extremely important, as well as Lakeshore. Now, when you talk about, you're talking, I appreciate your dreaming, but I'm not as great a dreamer, and maybe I'm too practical. But when you talk of large gaps of land that can remain low density along the light rail transit, I have concerns. I have concerns, because it takes density to make a light rail transit happen, right? Am I wrong? No, okay. So there's a large gap there between the Lakeshore and the You showed a program there, and the buildings are right up against the street, and it's solid, except for the roadway in the middle. Do we want that in Mississauga? That's what we want. Look at the street. Solid. I've been in Taiwan, it's solid, and they're building a light rail, a subway in the middle of the street. There's very few trees and very little green space along the way. It's just solid. High rises all the way. I'm not sure that people in Mississauga want that. So we got some philosophy to overcome. We have some philosophy to overcome in order to get light rail transit going in the city of Mississauga. And when density comes up at council meetings and planning, there's a lot of concern raised by the public and sometimes by the council. So we have to face up to it. If you want light rail transit, you got to accept the density along the line. And then the feeder lines come in. So a great plan, and Metrolinx is quite excited about this. It has a major priority with Metrolinx, our light rail transit on Hurontario Street. If we can bring it along to the point that it can start to be implemented, that Metrolinx will be supportive of it. Because if we're not ready for it, it'll get pushed back. So it's very important, Martin, that we be upfront and be ready for it, so that when it comes to Metrolinx, that we can say it's ready to go. The reason that Viva got approval to go is because they were ready to go. That was the York region got approval because they were ready to go. So we better be ready to go when it comes to Metrolinx, the funding of our light rail on Hurontario Street.
I think Mrs. Sajecki wants to comment.
Yeah, I just want to comment.
But just remember, you can't put all the density in Cooksville. Right?
And we're not arguing against a lot of it. That's
No.
not the, we're willing to accept more than our fair share.
But you can't put it all in Cooksville, and that's what we've been doing, I have to say. We've been putting it in Cooksville, and we can't put it, you can't have all the density in one spot, is what I'm saying. You got to spread it in order to make the light rail transit success. And I don't know if you consultants have figured out, but we've asked our staff at Metrolinx to come up with some, we got all kinds of consultants on the staff. Sometimes I wonder how many we have, but anyway, at Metrolinx. Can you determine what density is required for a light rail transit? We've asked them, what density is required? They got to get some, because that determines whether or not it can be financially viable from an operating point of view. So there's got to be a connection between the operating cost and the density. And we've asked our consultants to look at that.
Councillor Parrish?
I've been accumulating ideas.
Mayor McCallion?
Yeah, well, the development levies, the Premier's made a statement, he's not opening it up, so that's gone. And it's certainly not going to be opened up. He's told the building industry, an announcement that it will not be opened up. And we're only getting 90%. We lose out on the 10. It's interesting, when we fought for the 100%, transit didn't seem to be in the minds of the provincial people at the time. It's just interesting. Here we were fighting for the 10% for transit. We felt it was a hard service, just like water, sewer, and everything else. But we didn't win on it. They threw it in with baseball diamonds and community centers. They felt the same treatment for them. Yeah. There's Metrolinx is looking at, we've got to finance these projects. The province, yes, has allocated $11.5 billion. That's the capital cost. That's a one-shot deal. And we don't even know how much. In fact, the program that we've given them is $13.5 billion. With the projects that could get moving now, it would have some impact. But we still are struggling with how will we finance, how will the municipalities or Metrolinx, it's not sure yet whether the inter-regional projects will be dealt with like GO. If you could switch all the inter-regional projects to the GO plan, then the province accepts the responsibility. We'll maybe have to make a contribution, etc. So the whole idea of financing the Metrolinx is a big question mark. But we're working on many angles. The province is hesitant on us coming out with a plan at this point because, in their opinions, it's a tax increase. They relate, but the operating cost of transit to a tax increase if we went with toll roads, etc. So we're not anywhere near how it's all going to be financed, I just have to tell you. We're struggling with it, as Ed said. We're looking at all kinds of alternatives, but it's the province that must accept it.
If I might just further to Janice's point about the development charges and the difficulties with it. I mean,